Today's case takes us back to a bitter Midwestern winter, to a time when kids still walked to the corner store alone, and parents trusted that, by dinner, everyone would be home. In Oakland County, Michigan, in 1976 and 1977, 4 children never came back. Their bodies were carefully laid out in the snow, as if tucked in for sleep. They had been bathed, fed, and groomed by the very person who would end their lives. The press would call him the Oakland County child killer, the babysitter killer. Nearly 50 years later, nobody has been convicted, but there are suspects, secrets, and some very dark theories about what was really going on behind the pleasant facades of Detroit's wealthy suburbs. This is a deep dive into one of America's most disturbing unsolved serial murder cases. A quick warning, this episode deals with the abduction and murder of children, sexual assault, and allegations of organized child abuse. Listener discretion is strongly advised. February 19th, 1976, Southfield, Michigan. It's late morning when a man walking past a local office building sees what he thinks is a mannequin in the snow. As he gets closer, he realizes it's no mannequin at all, but the small body of a boy lying neatly on his back as if someone had gently placed him there to sleep. The boy is 12-year-old Mark Stebbins. He'd vanished 4 days earlier after leaving an American Legion Hall in Ferndale to walk the short distance home. When police arrive, the scene is deeply unsettling. Mark's clothes are clean, his shoelaces are tied, his arms are pulled close to his side. It looks almost tender, but the details, once investigators look closer, are horrifying. Mark's body has been washed, his nails have been carefully manicured, his clothes, too, appear washed and pressed. An autopsy will later reveal that he'd been held captive, repeatedly sexually assaulted, and then smothered or strangled. Whoever did this to Mark didn't just kill him and dump his body. He took care of him, fed him, cleaned him, dressed him, then posed him in an almost peaceful position in public view. That babysitter behavior, that twisted combination of care and cruelty, will become one of the signatures of the Oakland County child killer. But in February 1976, nobody knows that. To the Southfield police, Mark's murder is tragic, but it's just one crime in a busy metro area, and early mistakes will haunt this case for decades. Mark's body is moved from the scene before the county medical examiner arrives. Instead of going directly to the morgue, his body is taken to the police station, and his clothing is removed there, contaminating and destroying potential trace evidence. You could argue that nobody in 1976 could foresee DNA, mitochondrial profiles, or genetic genealogy. But the mishandling will later be cited as a crucial lost opportunity in one of the biggest unsolved cases in American history. Even early on, there are signs that this killer is more than a one-off. The psychiatrist Dr. Bruce Danto, who sometimes consults with police, proposes a strange tactic. They should return to the dump site and lure the killer back. So police place a child-sized mannequin, dressed like Mark, in the exact spot where his body had been found. When they return to check on the scene, the mannequin is still there, but something else is lying in the snow. A funeral card from Mark's own service. It's as if the killer is taunting them. I was there. I watched. You didn't see me. At this point, police still don't know that this won't be the last time they are mocked, misled, or outmaneuvered. 10 months pass, parents grieve, the community tries to move on. Winter comes again to Michigan. December 22nd, 1976, Royal Oak. 12-year-old Jill Robinson argues with her mother about something painfully ordinary, chores. She storms out of the house with a bicycle and a backpack, heading toward a nearby store. It's the kind of scene that plays out in thousands of homes every day. Only this time, the child won't come back. When Jill doesn't return, there's an assumption, both in the family and at first among police, that she may have run away. Her father, Tom Robinson, hopes that she'll cool off and come home. But hours stretch into a night and then another. 4 days later, on December 26th, a passing motorist on I-75 near Troy notices something on the shoulder of the freeway. It's Jill. She's lying on her back by the guardrail, propped against a snowbank, as if someone set her there. A 12-gauge shotgun blast has torn through her face. Unlike Mark, Jill was not smothered or strangled. She was shot. And once again, the handling of the scene raises questions. Neither the state police lab nor the county sheriff's crime scene unit is called out. As with Mark, crucial evidence may have been lost. Jill's father would later talk about his anger, that early assumption that Jill was a runaway, the delay in treating her case as a possible abduction. He said, quote, "They won't respond to what they consider a runaway for 48 hours. But she wasn't a runaway. She was a kid who got angry, stomped her feet out of the house, and got picked up by a creep." End quote. Another child, dead. Another body, staged in public view. Another winter day in Oakland County. Still, authorities are not yet ready to say a serial killer is at work. Jill was shot. Mark was smothered. Their circumstances are different. The idea of a stranger hunting children in these affluent suburbs is something many people, especially law enforcement, are reluctant to accept. It will take another victim to force that realization. New Year's weekend, 1977. 10-year-old Kristine Mihelich lives in the suburb of Berkeley. It's January 2nd, cold and dull, and Kristine is bored. She asks her mother, Deborah, if she can walk to the 7-Eleven to buy a magazine. Normally, Deborah doesn't let her cross busy 12-mile road, but Kristine had run errands earlier that day and had been responsible. Against that uneasy parental instinct, Deborah gives in, with conditions. She tells her daughter to wait for the traffic light, go straight there, and come straight back. Hurry, she says. Kristine promises she will. Half an hour later, Kristine still isn't home. Deborah calls a friend, then the store, then the police. In days to come, she barely sleeps, pacing the floor while volunteers and officers search the neighborhoods and fields of Oakland County. The community rallies. Flyers are printed. Deb appears on television to beg for her little girl's return. A reward fund is established and grows to $17,000, a huge sum in 1977. Days become weeks. Deborah keeps a 24-hour vigil, waiting for the phone to ring, hoping for a ransom demand, anything that might mean her daughter is still alive. It's all for nothing. On January 21st, 1977, 19 days after Kristine disappeared, a motorist in Franklin spots a small body in a roadside snowbank. It's Kristine. She's been laid out neatly, arms folded across her chest, eyes closed. Like Mark, she has been washed, her clothes cleaned, and the medical examiner determines that she died of suffocation, likely several days before her body was found. By now, patterns are becoming impossible to ignore. All three victims are between 10 and 12 years old. All were taken from suburban areas along or near the Woodward Avenue corridor. All were held captive for days. In at least 2 cases, they were bathed, groomed, and carefully posed in public places where they would be discovered. Fibers found on the victims' bodies are consistent across all the confirmed cases, suggesting the same environment, vehicle, or materials. After Kristine's murder, authorities publicly acknowledge what many parents already fear. Oakland County may have a serial child killer. Michigan State Police lead an unprecedented multi-agency task force. 13 communities pool resources. It becomes, at the time, the largest homicide investigation in U.S. history. But the killer is not yet finished. March 16, 1977, Birmingham, Michigan. 11-year-old Timothy, aka Tim King, is the youngest of 4 children in a close-knit Catholic family. That Wednesday evening, Tim asks his mother if he can ride his skateboard to the local pharmacy to buy candy. It's just a short trip through a neighborhood that feels safe. His mother hesitates, but it's early evening, and this is Birmingham, one of the wealthiest suburbs in the state. She lets him go. Tim is last seen leaving the drugstore with a bag of candy in his hand. He never makes it home. The community, already on edge from the previous murders, erupts into full-blown panic. This time, police treat the disappearance as an emergency from the outset. The Birmingham police chief says grimly that whatever happened to Tim doesn't look particularly good. Witnesses come forward. 2 people report seeing a boy matching Tim's description in the pharmacy parking lot, talking to a man with shaggy hair and sideburns, standing next to a blue AMC Gremlin with a white stripe down the side. That tip will become legendary in this case. At the time, it triggers a massive automotive dragnet. Police stop drivers and blue gremlins across the region, trying to find the man with the shaggy hair. Years later, some investigators will wonder whether a gremlin was ever really involved at all. A massive search operation begins. Helicopters sweep fields. Detectives go door to door. Volunteers scour woods and culverts. The King family pleads on television, with Tim's father, Barry, looking straight into the camera and asking the killer to return his son. At the same time, fear in the community reaches a breaking point. Kids who once walked to school now travel in groups or under parental escort. Parents begin driving their children everywhere. Teachers discuss stranger danger in classrooms. 6 days later, on March 23rd, 2 teenagers driving along Gill Road in Livonia notice a small form lying in a shallow ditch, just south of 8 Mile Road, not far from a busy intersection. They stop and discover the body of a young boy. It's Timothy King. Once again, the staging is meticulous. Tim lies neatly in the ditch, his clothes clean, his skateboard placed about 15 feet away. The autopsy reveals details that will haunt Detroit for decades. Tim has been sexually assaulted by an object. He bears rope burns on his wrists and ankles. His cause of death is suffocation, estimated at about 6 hours before his body was found, meaning the killer kept him alive for 6 days. And then there is what's in his stomach. Half-digested, fried chicken. A detail unbearable in its cruelty, because Tim's favorite meal was Kentucky Fried Chicken, and his mother had mentioned this in one of her television appeals. The killer had fed him his favorite food before killing him. By now, everyone is sure. The same predator has killed Mark, Jill, Kristine, and Tim. 2 boys, 2 girls, all preteens, all from the same broad suburban corridor, all held for days, groomed, and left in public view. The boys were sexually assaulted. The girls, as far as the public knows, were not. Oakland County is officially in terror, and the hunt for the Oakland County child killer is on. The task force that forms around the case is massive for its time. At its peak, more than 100 detectives from multiple agencies work in a central command post, fielding thousands of calls. By contemporary accounts and later documentaries, the investigation will receive somewhere between 11,000 and 18,000 tips, generating hundreds of thousands of pages of reports and files. A 1977 radio documentary on the case, Winter's Fear, The Children, The Killer, The Search, will win a Peabody Award. The entire Detroit media machine is focused on one question: who is killing our children? Detectives develop a criminal profile. A white male, between 20 and 30 years old, above average intelligence and education, living or working in Oakland County. He is compulsively clean, likely does not abuse drugs or alcohol, and may work a white-collar 9-to-5 job, somewhere children would see him as an authority figure. He has the means to keep a child captive for up to 18 days. He may have had prior contact with police and may be in therapy for mental health issues. In other words, someone who looks respectable, someone parents and kids would not instinctively fear. Investigators compile multiple composite sketches based on witness statements, especially from the Tim King abduction. Shaggy hair, sideburns, thin, sharp features, but none of the sketches ever leads to an arrest. Meanwhile, the case file grows. Fibers match across victims. Patterns emerge. All 4 confirmed victims vanish within a mile of Woodward Avenue. All are kept alive and cared for. All are left in places where they will be found by passers-by, not hidden away. As more cases of missing and murdered children are reviewed, the number of possible victims grows. Depending on the source, as many as 7 children disappeared in that period in the area, and up to 10 murders may be related, though only 4 are officially attributed to the Oakland County child killer. The investigation spreads beyond local crimes. One avenue leads to a disturbing discovery: an organized pedophile ring operating in Michigan and beyond. In the mid-1970s, law enforcement uncovers a child abuse network connected to a private retreat on Lake Michigan's North Fox Island. It's run by the wealthy Frank Sheldon, who presents it as a camp for boys, but allegedly uses it to lure children for sexual exploitation and to produce child pornography. Sheldon will flee the country in 1976 and never face trial, dying in 1996. His associate, Gerald Richards, is prosecuted for child pornography and also eventually dies. Some investigators begin to ask an unsettling question. Could the Oakland County child killer be connected to this ring? Former Wayne County detective Corey Williams later says that their team was among the first to seriously examine pornography and pedophile rings as a motive in the Oakland County case. Whether the children had been filmed or photographed, their abuse sold or traded. One suspect in the child porn trade, interviewed in the Stateville Correctional Center in Illinois in March 1977, tells Michigan detectives that such material would likely be marketed through certain underground channels, but he doubts that the Oakland County killer would be interested in that kind of profit. He describes the murderer as, quote, psychotic, driven more by compulsion than by money. Still, the idea of a ring persists. A Detroit area network targeting boys had been in operation since the early 1970s, and some of the men later connected to that ring will become suspects or persons of interest in the Oakland County child killer investigation. Is the killer a lone predator, or the most visible face of something bigger and more organized? To this day, that question has never been fully answered. In 1977, while the official task force is in full swing, a Detroit psychiatrist receives a letter that reads like the script of a horror film. The writer calls himself Alan. He claims to be the roommate and unwilling accomplice of the Oakland County child killer, whom he refers to as Frank. The letter, riddled with spelling and grammar mistakes, is long and rambling, but the emotion is clear. I am desperate and nearly gone crazy and haven't got no place left to turn, Alan writes. Please don't give up the killer to the police. You must help me, as there is no one else I can't turn to. This is for real. I know who the killer is. I live with him. I am his slave. Alan claims he has driven with Frank while the latter looked for boys, though he says he was not present during the actual abductions of the 4 known victims. He paints Frank as a traumatized veteran who saw children killed in Vietnam, now reenacting that trauma in Oakland County. He tells the psychiatrist that he's suicidal, terrified, and wants immunity in exchange for leading police to physical evidence, photographs of the victims, taken while they were alive in captivity. As proof that his letter is real, Allen demands that the psychiatrist place a strange phrase, "Weather Bureau says trees to bloom in 3 weeks," in the Sunday edition of a Detroit newspaper. The psychiatrist, Dr. Danto, cooperates with police and the coded message is published. Allen later calls to confirm he saw it, and some reports say he agreed to meet. But whatever leads came from this line of inquiry, they did not solve the case. Allen and Frank remain mysteries, whether they were real, hoaxes, or perhaps a mix of both. The letter will later become central to another controversial figure in this story, a man who calls himself Jeff. Over the decades, investigators will comb through hundreds of suspects and persons of interest. Some names will generate headlines, theories, and books. Others will flicker briefly in the news, then vanish. One of the most infamous is Christopher Busch. Busch is the son of a wealthy GM executive. By the mid-1970s, he has already been arrested multiple times for sexually abusing boys. He is convicted of child sex offenses and known to law enforcement as a dangerous pedophile. In 1978, a year after Tim King's murder, Busch is found dead in his home, apparently from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. On his bedroom wall is a strange drawing, a screaming boy, bound, terrified, with something around his neck. Some think it resembles Tim King. Police also find a length of rope that looks similar to the ligatures used in the Oakland County victims. For a while, Busch is the prime suspect. His wealth, his access to children, the timing of his death, and the macabre drawing all point in his direction. But in 2012, after renewed DNA testing, Oakland County prosecutors announced that Busch has been exonerated by forensic evidence. His DNA does not match the profile taken from the victims. They publicly state that they believe the real killer is still alive. Not everyone is convinced. Some investigators and family members suspect that Busch may have been involved in some way, perhaps as part of a network, while someone else physically committed the murders. Still, officially, Christopher Busch is not considered the Oakland County child killer. Another name that surfaces is Archibald Edward Sloan. Sloan is a convicted child sex offender with a long history of abusing boys in Michigan. In the early 1980s, he is sent to prison for life, where he remains today. Decades after the Oakland County murders, investigators test hairs recovered from the victims and from the 1966 Pontiac Bonneville that Sloan owned during the 1970s. Using mitochondrial DNA technology, which examines maternal lineages, they make a startling discovery. Hair from Sloan's car shares the same mitochondrial profile as hairs found on at least one of the male victims. This doesn't mean the hair is Sloan's. Mitochondrial DNA can match multiple individuals within the same maternal line. And in this case, Sloan himself is not the direct match. But what it does mean is that someone whose mitochondrial DNA profile matches those hairs was in Sloan's car, and their hairs ended up both there and on a victim's body. In plain language, either the killer rode in Sloan's car, or one of the victims did, or both. Reporters and some investigators take this as evidence that Sloan knows more than he has admitted. One theory is that he may have loaned his car to someone who used it to transport victims. When Sloan is polygraphed by investigators in 2010 and again in 2012, he reportedly fails questions related to the Oakland County murders. Still, Sloan has never been charged in the case, and he continues to deny involvement. The DNA in his car remains one of the most concrete forensic links in the entire investigation, and one that suggests the killer moved in the same circles as known pedophiles in the Detroit area. From Sloan's car, the trail leads to another man, James Vincent Gunnels, Gunnels was a teenager in the 1970s, associated with known pedophiles in the area. When hairs from the victims and Sloan's car were analyzed, mitochondrial DNA linked them not only to Sloan's vehicle, but to Gunnels' maternal line. In other words, hairs found on Mark Stebbins and Timothy King are consistent with coming from either James Gunnels or a close maternal relative. When confronted by reporters decades later, Gunnels denies being the killer, but he makes a haunting statement. "I'm not guilty. My heart goes out to those families. It really, really, really does. I don't feel that they were served justice through any of this." The implication in some coverage is that Gunnels may know or suspect who in his family was involved. Yet, as with so many twists in the case, the DNA is suggestive, not definitive. It links people, cars, and victims, but it doesn't draw a straight line from any one man to all 4 murders. And there are more names. Another figure is Theodore Ted Lamborghini, a convicted child molester and a member of the Detroit area pedophile ring connected to North Fox Island and other abuse operations. Lamborghini is convicted on multiple counts of child rape and sentenced to life. As part of plea discussions, prosecutors offer him a reduced sentence, 15 years and a new identity, if he agrees to take a polygraph about the Oakland County murders. He refuses. Twice. He is publicly named by some officials as their, quote, most promising suspect at one point, and the family of Mark Stebbins files a wrongful death lawsuit alleging that Lamborghini abducted Mark and held him captive in a house in Royal Oak for 4 days before smothering him during a sexual assault. Despite this, Lamborghini has never been charged in the murders themselves, and no physical evidence has been made public tying him definitively to the 4 confirmed victims. Is he the killer, an associate of the killer, or simply one of several predators operating at the same time in the same place whose crimes have become entangled in public memory? The Oakland County file is crowded with such men: convicted child molesters, pornographers, drifters, businessmen, ex-cops. One early suspect, David Norberg, a former Pontiac police officer convicted of child molestation, had a car resembling one described near an abduction site, but DNA eventually cleared him. No single name has ever emerged as the answer, but there is one more figure whose presence in the story is as eerie as it is frustrating. A man who calls himself Jeff, or Bob. In the late 2000s, more than 30 years after the murders, an anonymous man contacts investigators and journalists about the Oakland County case. He uses the alias Jeff in some contexts, Bob in others, and insists on strict anonymity. He claims to have worked in law enforcement, though he won't say where. Jeff Bob says he has spent over 10,000 hours investigating the Oakland County murders with a team of independent researchers. He claims he can identify the killer, but there is a catch. He refuses to share his findings with police unless they first provide him with specific information, details about their own persons of interest, and access to the original Allen letter so he can confirm that his suspect matches clues only known to insiders. Prosecutor Jessica Cooper and other officials meet with him in 2010. According to her, Jeff presents a rambling statement tying the murders to pagan holidays, the lunar calendar, and Wiccan rituals. She says he offers no new evidence and that his request to inspect the Allen letter is denied. Undeterred, Bob shifts his focus to the media and to the families. He contacts Deb Jarvis, Kristine Mihelich's mother, and Detroit TV reporters. He claims that the Oakland County child killer had between 11 and 16 victims, far more than the 4 officially recognized. He suggests that the killings were ritual human sacrifices timed to pagan celebrations and phases of the moon. In 2012, with the help of attorney Paul Hughes, who represents one victim's mother, Bob participates in conference calls with a select group of Detroit journalists, presenting his theory under the condition that nothing be recorded. Hughes then files a $100 million lawsuit alleging a cover-up by Oakland County authorities and demanding the prosecutor's resignation, citing Bob's claims. The lawsuit is eventually dismissed. The prosecutor publicly questions Jeff Bob's credibility. To this day, his identity remains unknown, and no independent evidence has validated his Wiccan theory. Many family members and investigators believe he exploited their desperation for answers. What Jeff Bob shows, more than anything, is how a case like this, unsolved, emotionally raw, and sprinkled with just enough mystery, can attract people who enter the story not to solve it, but to be part of it. And for the families, that can feel like a second victimization. For the parents, siblings, and friends of the 4 confirmed victims, the Oakland County case isn't just a cold file. It's a wound that never closes. Barry King, Tim's father, will spend decades pressing for answers. He reportedly contacts prosecutors, files FOIA requests, and compiles thousands of pages of documents. He and his family eventually produce a documentary, Decades of Deceit, accusing law enforcement of mishandling leads and withholding information. Funds from the documentary go to a foundation in Tim's name, supporting abused children. Catherine Broad, Tim's sister, maintains an online archive and blog where she posts documents, timelines, and commentary about the case, keeping pressure on authorities and providing a forum for others impacted by the murders. Deb Jarvis, Kristine's mother, sues prosecutors and investigators in 2012 for $100 million, alleging that their mishandling of the case destroyed any realistic chance of ever identifying the killer. The lawsuit is dismissed the following year. Jill Robinson's father, Tom, speaks openly about his belief that early decisions, like classifying Jill as a runaway, cost them crucial time and evidence. In 2018, more than 40 years after the murders, a presentation at the Berkeley Public Library draws a crowd of residents who had been children themselves at the time of the killings. Some recall the fear in their schools. Others share tips they gave police decades earlier and never heard about again. At that event, Barry King presents his report, Oakland County Child Killer, Coincidence or Cover-Up, alleging conspiracy among officials in multiple counties and departments. He argues that a known pedophile confessed during a polygraph exam and was never properly pursued. Author Marnie Rich Keenan's 2020 book, The Snow Killings, likewise suggests that infighting, bureaucratic turf wars, and decisions made to protect reputations, not children, hampered the investigation. All of this fuels a persistent question. Did authorities do everything they could? Or did mistakes, egos, and perhaps worse, allow the killer or killers to get away? We may never know the full truth. After Tim King's murder in 1977, the confirmed killings stop. The task force continues for another year, spending around $2 million, over $10 million in today's money, before it is disbanded in December 1978. Michigan State Police assume primary responsibility for the cold case. Over time, the Oakland County child killer fades from the front page, but he never disappears entirely. Every few years, a new development surfaces, a new suspect, a new DNA test, a new documentary. In the 2000s, advances in DNA technology allow old hairs and fibers to be retested, leading to the discoveries about Arch Sloan's car and James Gunnels. In 2007, a special task force is reformed to re-examine the case. It operates until 2010. In 2011, investigators publicly identify new persons of interest, suggesting fresh leads are being pursued. A Detroit TV station releases a multi-part docuseries, a podcast, Shattered, devotes an entire season to the case. Investigation Discovery releases Children of the Snow in 2019, and other independent documentaries follow. True crime authors dissect the case in books like The Kill Jar and The Snow Killings, blending memoir, investigation, and advocacy. The Michigan State Police confirm that the investigation remains open and that every new tip is checked. There is a DNA profile of an unidentified man linked to 2 victims in a car, but has never matched anyone in national databases. Some advocates criticize the state for not yet using advanced genetic genealogy techniques, methods that have solved cold cases like the Golden State Killer, to track down relatives of the mystery DNA donor. They argue that submitting the Oakland County profile to such services could finally break the case. A privately run site dedicated to the case points out that multiple unidentified DNA profiles exist from 2 victims and a vehicle, and insists that modern genealogical methods could quite possibly close this case, asking simply, why is this not being done? It's a haunting question, especially as time passes, witnesses die, and memories fade. The impact of the Oakland County child killer goes far beyond the 4 families at the center of the story. In the immediate aftermath of the murders, Oakland County's culture of trust and freedom for children evaporates. Parents begin escorting kids everywhere. Play that once happened in streets and vacant lots shifts indoors. Sociologists will later describe a culture of fear that takes root in the area. The case helps drive changes in child safety education. Schools introduce programs about stranger danger, personal safety, and reporting suspicious behavior, lessons that, in different forms, continue today. On the law enforcement side, the investigation becomes a grim model for future cases. How to coordinate across jurisdictions, how to manage enormous volumes of tips, and just as importantly, how early mistakes can cripple a case for decades. The murders also contribute to a broader national movement to create systems for missing children, poster programs, hotlines, and eventually the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Every year, vigils and remembrance events are held. The names Mark, Jill, Kristine, and Tim are still spoken aloud in suburban Michigan churches, libraries, and town halls. For some families, activism becomes a way of keeping their children's memories alive and pushing for better protections and investigative practices. Barry King's Foundation helps fund advanced forensic testing and cold cases. Others lobby for better interagency cooperation and transparency. The case also becomes part of local folklore, not just as a boogeyman story parents use to scare kids into obeying, but as a shared trauma that shaped how an entire generation viewed the world. Nearly 50 years on, that shadow hasn't fully lifted. Let's step back and look at the evidence and theories. We know this much. 4 children, Mark Stebbins, Joel Robinson, Kristine Mihelich, and Timothy King, were abducted between February 1976 and March 1977, all within a roughly 13-month period. They were aged 10 to 12, 2 boys and 2 girls. All were held for days, 3 were suffocated, 1 was shot. Their bodies were left in public places, carefully posed, often washed and cleaned. The boys were sexually assaulted. The girls, as far as we know, were not. Fibers and other trace evidence strongly suggest that the same offender, or offenders, handled all 4 victims. We also know the killings stopped, at least in Oakland County, after Tim King's murder. Multiple convicted pedophiles in the area were active at the same time, some linked to organized child pornography operations reaching as far as a private island. Mitochondrial DNA connects hairs from victims to Arch Sloan's car and to the maternal line of James Gunnels, hinting at a circle of offenders rather than a solitary killer living in isolation. No conclusive DNA match to any one known suspect has ever been made public. From this, several broad theories emerge. 1. A lone serial killer. This is the classic picture. One man fitting the task force's profile. Educated, neat, perhaps in a position of trust, who abducted, held, and killed all 4 children, keeping them for days in a home or hidden space before disposing of their bodies. In this scenario, other offenders like Sloan, Gunnels, and Lamborghini are either red herrings or liars seeking attention. 2. A small group or pedophile ring. Others argue that the evidence fits better with a small network of offenders. In this view, the same core group of men shared victims, vehicles, and perhaps locations, taking turns abducting and holding children. The grooming and staging behaviors could be the work of one dominant personality within that group. The connections between Sloan's car, Gunnels' DNA, and the known pedophile ring support this theory. 3. Copycats and over-attribution. A more skeptical stance holds that, in the panic of the late 1970s, multiple child murders of differing MO were lumped together under the Oakland County label. Some homicides, like Jill's shotgun death, may have been unrelated crimes, now overshadowed by the serial killer narrative. In this scenario, the myth of a single babysitter killer hides the reality of several different predators. 4. Conspiracy and cover-up. Driven by families and some journalists, this theory suggests that powerful individuals, wealthy businessmen, public officials, or their children were involved in organized abuse and that investigations were steered away from them to prevent scandal. The alleged mishandling of the evidence, the reluctance to pursue certain leads, and the disappearance of some case materials are cited as support. Concrete proof of such a conspiracy has never been made public, but the perception of secrecy has fueled mistrust for decades. The truth may lie somewhere in between. What seems hardest to dispute is that by modern standards, the investigation was a mixture of sincere effort and deadly missteps. Critical early scenes were mishandled. Runaway assumptions delayed urgent responses. Interagency turf wars may have hampered coordination, and later, institutional defensiveness may have discouraged full transparency. At the same time, the sheer volume of tips, over 11,000 by some counts, up to 18,000 by others, would have challenged even today's digital systems, let alone paper-based filing systems of the 1970s. And then, there is the passage of time. Witnesses die, suspects die, memories fade, physical evidence degrades. The only thing that doesn't fade is the harm. So where does that leave us? As of today, the Oakland County child killer case is still open. The Michigan State Police periodically remind the public, any new tip, no matter how small, will be investigated. There are also tools we didn't have before: advanced DNA analysis, genealogical matching, digital databases that can cross-reference old tips in seconds, and a public more aware than ever of the dangers of child exploitation. On the website of one advocacy group, a simple, pointed question appears under a description of the case. Currently, the Michigan State Police possess an unidentified DNA profile found on 2 of the victims and 1 from an automobile. A modern genetic genealogy profile could quite possibly close this case, but thus far, the DNA has not been submitted. Why is this? It's a question worth asking. Because while we've spent this episode talking about suspects, theories, and investigation failures, the core of this story is heartbreakingly simple. Mark Stebbins should have made it home from the American Legion Hall. Jill Robinson should have had a chance to slam her bedroom door, cool off, and apologize to her mom. Kristine Mihelich should have come back from the 7-Eleven with her magazine and a story about some neighbor she ran into. Timothy King should have returned from the pharmacy with a bag of candy, skated up to his house, and fallen asleep that night in his own bed. Instead, Their lives were cut short by someone who used care and cleanliness as part of cruelty, who turned rituals of bathing, feeding, and tucking a child into instruments of control and terror. Whether that person acted alone or with others, whether he is dead or alive, somewhere there is someone, or someone's family, who knows the truth. In a 2021 interview, Mark's brother Michael said, "I'm just hoping that maybe something can come out after all these years. I would hope that if anybody out there has information in the case, that they would please put it forward, because it has been a very long 45 years for me with no answers at all." If you know anything about the Oakland County child killer case, even something that seemed insignificant back then, there are still investigators who want to hear it. Michigan State Police maintain a dedicated tip line at 1-855-MICH-TIP. Cases like this don't only get solved by breakthroughs in the lab, they get solved because someone decides, after decades of silence, to finally talk. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps weirdos like me keep making content about even weirder true crime cases. This podcast is written and hosted by me, Shay, and edited by my husband, Toby. This has been The Evidence Locker. I'll see you next time. Stay curious, stay safe. Join us next week as we open another locker.